Hello, everyone, and welcome to Critical Faculty. Today, I have a very interesting conversation brewing. We are going to be discussing somebody who's transitioned from a religion that is not very, a bit obscure in the Middle East and not so much heard of or read about, which is Jainism, an offshoot of Hinduism that is some would be dubbed as the world's most peaceful religion. And I've got the right person to chat to about this particular religion and the transition to being an atheist and a content creator in the process. Hello, Hemant. How are you?
Hey, Henny, I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much for accepting my invitation. I'm very excited
Sure.
about this conversation. So, while we're introducing yourself, Hemant, I'm going to show people your fantastic YouTube channel
Sure.
where you discuss all the current affairs and matters of belief that affect people's real life. So I'm going to yield the microphone to you, and I'm going to start displaying your YouTube channel where you're saying hello to the folks here and tell them what you do for a living.
Sure. I write about religion and politics and that intersection. I make videos about those issues. There are occasional other like evergreen content where it's talking about atheism 101, things that are wrong with the Bible. But a lot of it is talking about current events. And I also do a weekly podcast with a co-host where we talk about current events as well.
Very interesting. I've just spotted that most controversial situation at the moment, the Dalai Lama with
Yeah.
that bizarre, and I would like to get your opinion in a second here because
Yeah.
that was like when I watched the video, I was absolutely shocked. But
Yeah.
folks, this is Hemant's beautiful channel. It's got loads and loads of interesting current affairs and what I really like about the content, it's not just a sort of ivory tower talking about Plato and Socrates. this
Yeah.
is this is real world issues.
I would get very bored on those other topics. So
I,
try
I
to
can
make
I can
things,
understand.
I try to make videos I would personally watch.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So please check it out. It's in the description of the video. Um, and please subscribe to the channel because, especially if you live in North America, because these will be very, very current and relevant matters.
Yeah. Thanks.
Great. Now let's dive into it.
Sure.
W- Jainism. I mean, my audiences are mostly ex-Christians, ex-Muslims, or Muslims and Christians. Few Jews. Um, People will understand a little bit about Buddhism, Hinduism, but this is a religion that's only about 5 million around the world, a small area
Yeah.
in China, sorry, in India, and bits and pieces around the world. Tell us more about Jainism.
Yeah. Jainism is a philosophy, honestly, more than it is a religion. But it's primarily, I mean, if you ask Jains what their religion's about, it's mostly nonviolence. You're not supposed to hurt other people, other creatures. Jains are pretty vegetarian. The definition of that may change, but in general, they're vegetarian. If you think of like fundamentalist Jain, we are thinking of like, and I'm not saying I ever did this or the people I know who are Jains do this, but stereotypically, they would cover their mouths when they talk so they're not hurting bacteria. They would sweep the ground before they walk so you're not stepping on any bugs. You're not supposed to have bad thoughts either because that mental violence is a sort of violence too. So philosophically, it's not a bad thing at all. You may recall, some of your viewers may recall, Sam Harris wrote his book, The End of Faith, many years
Yeah.
ago about the problems with religious extremism and religious moderation. But one of the things I found interesting in what he wrote is that he said one exception to everything he's saying is that if people were fundamentalist Jain, maybe that wouldn't be such a bad thing because, extreme nonviolence doesn't sound bad. Now, here's where I part ways with all that. They do still have harmful, incorrect beliefs. They believe in karma, heaven and hell, reincarnation. That stuff doesn't make a lot of sense. They also could, in some cases, and there have been news stories about this, they do fasting like a lot of religions do, but
Yeah.
sometimes that can get extreme too, where you have
Yeah.
kids fasting for weeks on end and again, the definition of fasting could include water, could include a little bit of food, depending on how you do it. But you have kids fasting for a long period of time when their bodies are not developed. They get sick. Sometimes they die. So we can get extreme in that way as well. But those are anomalies in my experience when I read about those things. But it wasn't until I began asking the questions a lot of us ask about our religion that I realized, wait a minute, I don't think the beliefs that I've been taught about Jainism, not the nonviolent stuff, but the actual religious beliefs about it, those don't make a lot of sense. And if I don't believe in reincarnation or the deities who have escaped the cycle of reincarnation, if I
Yeah.
don't believe in that stuff, can I still be a Jain? And I think the answer is no. So, look, I am still personally vegetarian. I mean, I think there is ethical reasons you could do that, and it wasn't like it was a hard switch to just maintain it for me. But I don't call myself a Jain because I don't buy into the supernatural stuff that they believe.
Right. I'm a vegetarian and I'm not a Jain, so I think we can meet somewhere. There, it's been described as transtheistic religion, so it's religion without gods, but it
Yeah,
has
it's a
the
weird
24.
dynamic there. There
Yeah,
there are
yeah,
24 Tirthankars that you're referring to who have escaped that cycle of reincarnation.
yeah,
The weird thing is, you're right. There's no creator God who kind of set all this in motion in Jainism. And yet, if you ask people in the Jain community, I say this about like my parents, but I think it's true of a lot of people. Like, do you believe in God? The answer is probably more yes than no. I don't have a survey to back that up or anything, but anecdotally, that's what I grew up thinking because that's what
yeah.
everyone around me seemed to think. So you're right. There's this weird thing about Jains don't have a god per se, even though they believe in supernatural stuff. And yet, I think to a person, if you ask Jains, like, do you believe in God? The answer is probably yes.
Yeah,
I find
but
that weird.
but it's a very funny thing because most people would tell you they believe in God, but their definition of a God is very. I mean, like somebody like Spinoza, and I'm sorry to bring philosophy here, but
Yeah.
is a pantheist. God is God. God is the
God is
universe.
everything. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and that can explain a lot because the universe is eternal according to Jainism.
Right. Right.
It doesn't have a beginning and will never end. It's just a
Hmm.
full cycle
Which
of the
is
Dharma.
anti-science in many ways as well, because that's not our understanding of the world either. So,
Do you have a caste system as a repercussion, like in
not
Hinduism?
my understanding of Jainism. No.
Yeah,
Um. So I never experienced it. I was never taught about it. I have not seen that firsthand.
interesting,
I want to
interesting.
specify, like, I am by no means a Jain scholar. What I'm telling you is stuff based on my own experience growing up
Right.
in those circles and all that. So I found out, like, much later, like high school, college, that there were beliefs about Jainism that are like written in textbooks about this stuff that I'm like, that's not what I grew up being told in the Jain circles I was in. And there
Yeah.
is that disconnect between what scholars will tell you Jainism is and how a lot of the Jains I know have grown up.
And you're not very different from all other religions because if you're Christian or a Muslim, you'll have the different degrees.
Sure.
'Cause I was just reading someone on Jainism and some extreme cases, root vegetables like eating
Oh,
potatoes
yeah.
because it's under the ground and therefore it might be attached to the other living organism or it might give life further to the
Right.
plants because you're not even so you believe everything or used to believe everything has a sort of a soul or a spirit.
Right. I
Even
mean, there are days in the Jain community that I'm a part of, my family's a part of, where when people fast, or maybe they will allow themselves to eat once a day and that's it. But root vegetables and other things might be off limits even on those days for that reason. And at this point, I'm beyond trying to argue about it and
I
why it
know.
doesn't make sense. So I kind of gave up on that one. You know what I mean?
And that's like we're talking potatoes. You're
Yeah.
about to go to Ireland, and that's the national vegetables.
Yeah. Right.
You're gonna eat a lot of potatoes in Ireland.
Yeah, that's never been one of those beliefs in Jainism that I ever really participated in because I
Yeah,
was a child when I was a Jain, and afterwards I'm like, oh well, that one's getting discarded.
That's yeah.
So, yeah.
Everybody likes a bowl of chips.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. And so it's the you're trying to escape the cycle by detaching yourself from materialistic stuff. Even
Yeah.
celibacy, or
Right. Right.
it's practiced at least by the monks, but people are
Right.
at least are expected to be very faithful to their partners. That's
Sure.
your vow.
Yeah. I mean, all that's accurate. I mean, keep this in mind. I would stop calling myself a Jain. I probably stopped calling myself a Jain when I was like 14. So a lot
Right.
of those things like celibacy, I mean, that was just never a part of the conversation because I wasn't old enough to have that be relevant. You know what I mean? And so some of those things that might be relevant for adults, I just never cared about. It never mattered to me. The big thing was like, what am I allowed to eat and not allowed to eat? And once you get used to those rules and limitations, it's not that big of a deal. Um, so yeah, like it's been interesting watching Jainism sometimes get praised, even by atheists,
Yeah.
as a non-violent religion, and yet a lot of those same people will kind of overlook the other spiritual pseudo scientific nonsense that comes along for the ride.
Yeah, it's amazing how people can forgive a lot of things just for a bit of peace. Like if it's peaceful, they can
Right.
get away with a lot of crazy stuff. I mean, Sam
Sure.
Harris, and I think he was contrasting it with Islam, because I think it
Yeah,
was might have been
probably.
on the Ben Affleck Ben Mar.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think there was a conversation about Islam was the mother load of bad ideas, and
Right.
it got heated with Ben Affleck saying, "Well, that's racist."
Right,
And all
right,
that sort
right.
of stuff. But you're absolutely spot on, because Jainism puts a lot of personal pressure on you. And I think would that be like in the 21st century, with the younger generations that have been, seeing the world is opened up now, would be very difficult to achieve?
The limitation, you know what? It's a good question. I wish I could give you a good answer for it. And honestly, I don't know these days what Jainism looks like on the ground. Because keep in mind, at least in the United States, we do have a trend of people moving away from organized religion. And so just presenting a religion that believes a lot of really insane stuff mixed with some good ideas, I don't know how appealing that would be for a younger generation that has a lot of other reasons not to join much of anything, certainly not religious stuff. So, as appealing as it might be, my gut instinct is that people are not flocking to Jainism as like a better religious alternative. They're just ditching religion altogether. Plus, at least as far as Indian people go, like myself, a lot of us at this point are now second generation Americans who have grown up in a place where a lot of the parents may not be traditionally religious either, which means
Mhm.
there's even less of a reason to adopt Hinduism or Jainism, the religions our parents may have had. So I don't know. There's no survey I've ever seen that says like Jainism in the US is on
Yeah,
the rise, because it's always such a negligible number of people anyway.
yeah.
But I would be surprised if younger people are rushing to it the same way they might other religions.
I was looking at some of the numbers, and apparently in Japan, between 2010 and 2020, 5,000 families took up Jainism. But I mean,
That's nothing.
5,000. That's nothing.
Right.
But it's quite interesting to see there, maybe because I think you always get that, you get with the rise of technology, you'll always have the people who are resisting. So you know what, we wish we can go back to the old days where things were simpler, so that
Right.
might be a resistance to modernism in a way, and trying to get away from materialistic life.
Right. Right. I mean, there's, like I said, there's a lot of appealing parts of Jainism. I totally get why people might appreciate a lot of those things and why it's still sustainable, in this age. But at the same time, there's a lot of really bad ideas that come along with it. And again, there's no good way to reconcile a lot of these things. Because, I mean, when it comes to abortion rights and things like that, I believe, and again, I wasn't old enough to have these discussions when I was Jain, but I'm pretty sure Jainism is anti-abortion.
Oh, of course, if you can't hurt anything, then
Right. If
yeah,
everything has a soul, if everything is reincarnated. I mean, that doesn't work in the United States. That's a horrible idea. It's not
yeah,
okay with Catholicism or evangelical Christianity. I'm not sure why, being Jain would be beneficial in that regard, because
yeah.
politically speaking, and again, here's another conversation I never had growing up because it wasn't relevant. But what if you are LGBTQ? How do they handle that stuff? Again, I'm sure there are people who are Jain who have those conversations about what that means within the religion, but it's not like there's a pope of Jainism who dictates what the rules are. So a lot of times it just kind of depends on where you live, what your political
Yeah.
beliefs are, and things
I'm
like
trying
that.
to imagine if you're a Jain and you happen to be one of your family members or friends is LGBTQ a member, you
Right.
probably think they are in a cycle where they're being punished.
Yeah, I don't know what the answer is. I wouldn't be surprised if that was a belief some people held. And that's separate from just not understanding it or being uncomfortable about it, which I'm sure a lot of older people are in general. But yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know if there's a religious rule regarding that stuff because it wasn't the environment I grew up in.
And that's the thing. Religion has to keep reinventing itself because it has to keep up with current affairs.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff that weren't issues. I mean, and that's where philosophy that inform ethics.
Yeah.
When you have Tesla committee having an ethical group talking about if the car is about to hit somebody, a self-driven car, who would it hit? The baby or the old man, and you'll end up with the same dilemma of what to do in certain ethical situations.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely.
So, 14 is when Jainism sort of faded away. It
For
wasn't
me.
like so it wasn't. Am I taking it right? Am I thinking it wasn't a violent departure? It was more like a relationship that just faded away.
Yeah, that seems fair. I mean, 14 is when roughly around that time, is when I started realizing, wait a minute, how come I have these beliefs? No one else has these beliefs. How come we think this makes sense when intuitively it does not make any sense?
Mhm.
And when I started asking these questions, which I never knew I could even ask, and then trying to find the answers on like old school dial up AOL or something like that, it seemed like the people who had responses that made sense, it wasn't Christians who happened to be online saying, well, your supernatural beliefs are wrong. Let me give you a new dose of supernatural beliefs. It was the people saying, no, the supernatural ideas make no sense. God makes no sense. And I don't even know if I heard the word atheist at the time, but the people who were arguing for atheism seemed to make a lot of sense. And so internally, I just gravitated in that area because everything those people were saying seemed to be in the right direction. Everything I learned, everything I was questioning, all pointed in one direction. And so, yeah, it was like a slow, gradual breakup that I just felt comfortable with pretty quickly. And then it wasn't until college and beyond where I'm like, I feel like I'm really passionate about this. I want to do something with it. I began working with nonprofit groups that either promote atheism or support church state separation and figured out like, okay, these are the people who are doing the work. This is what they are passionate about. And by the way, it's not the stuff that online atheists care about. It's, church state separation issues are sometimes in the weeds, very technical, and not arguing about religion itself. And so I gravitated in that direction. And for the past 15 or so years, really what I've done is just try to articulate what the issues are, why my position is right. Hopefully people will agree with me. But I kind of write assuming that the audience is full of religious people who may disagree with me. And I want to convince them I'm still right about this. And I'm not even arguing about your religion. I'm saying this
Mm.
institution is harmful. This belief leads us down a wrong path. And hopefully they'll something in them will be like, well, he has a point on that one, even if I'm still religious. And who knows what happens down the line.
I think I'm so grateful there are people like you, because I spend most of my time in dismantling the belief idea, or
Yeah.
believing things without evidence, or the theoretical. I'm your theoretical physicist,
Yeah.
and you are the practical one who will go, look, I am going to see what kind of actions are being sort of produced as a result of that belief in real life, and I'm
I mean,
gonna.
it comes down to a question of what do I think is most convincing. If I don't win anything if someone else becomes an atheist,
Mhm.
but what do I think is the most strategic way to get people to change their minds on this stuff? I think there are atheists who might say, if I can show you why the Bible can't be trusted, if I can show you why your religious beliefs make no sense, those old school atheism 101 arguments and debates, that's one way to do it. And no doubt that has worked on a lot of people. So cool. Good for those people who can do it well. Personally, I think it's just as strategic, if not more strategic, to say, well, if you're saying this religion is, where you get your values and ethics from, let me show you what your religion has done in the real world. And here's how it has harmed people. Here's where it has led us. And I think even a lot of, we've seen this with like young evangelicals, young Mormons, young whatever, where it's like, okay, even in the best case scenario, there's plenty of hypocrites in my circle. There's a lot of harm being done. There's no room for nuance in these beliefs. And maybe, even if I'm not ready to call myself an atheist, I can't give my time and money and energy to an institution that doesn't care about LGBTQ people, that has no room for thought for like abortion. I mean, young Catholics have nothing in common with the Pope and the Vatican.
Very
A
true.
lot of young Muslims would say their religious beliefs are not central to how they live their life. I mean, that's true of you name the religion, it's probably true. And again, if they are willing to take that step where they will admit, okay, I believe in God, but the church I go to has said some harmful things about sex and women and whatever and LGBTQ people, maybe my church is the problem. Like, maybe I'm the baddie here. And then, like, whatever. If you walk away from your church or your religious organization, I don't care if you believe in God at that point. Like, that's such low priority when it comes to the things I care about. Um, and so I feel like my attention is better paid to just getting people to understand, recognize the harm caused by institutional religion. And the best way to do it is writing and talking about current events more than saying, let me explain why the Book of Mormon is not true or something like that. And I'm
Yeah,
not saying
no.
that stuff is useless. It's just not my priority.
I think it's the two-pronged approach. I think if somebody's attacking the source, and
Yeah.
as you said, if somebody's an atheist, then they're not entirely there, because you can get atheists who are bigots
Well,
and
and that's the
homophobic and
other
all
thing.
that.
Like, if you become an atheist and you are opposed to a lot of those issues, humanistic art, humanistic values, civil rights. And by the way, those atheists exist. And it's
Yes.
like, well, am I better off because I mean, there are some groups that will say we're going to go to the meeting of all the Trump supporters to try to win members to our atheist organization. And it's like, we don't, that's not good for anybody. Like, having a bunch of dumb beliefs in the name of atheism, you're still dumb. Like, we're not all better off because of that. I'm much more happy to ally with progressive Christians who
True.
believe in God than, like, I'm not going to be happy because there's a group of like Republican atheists who promote harmful beliefs. Like, what's the better scenario out of those two? It's the progressive Christians every single time.
Yes, because you're looking for the beliefs that inform actions, and if the
Yeah.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, yeah, we only have that one life, and you want to reduce the harm as much as you can.
Yeah.
We're linked on, I mean, you go to the depth of it, and we're evolved from a common ancestor, and we're not perfect. Our brains are not fine tuned for knowledge. It's mostly fine tuned to survive, and we struggle. So if you can minimize harm as much as you can,
Right.
that's a good life lived.
Right. And there are plenty of atheists who cause harm, and I hope I do a better job today than I did before of like calling them out when I feel it's necessary. But again, this goes back to the practical applications of all this stuff. If you believe in God, but you are motivated by your faith to help the poor, help the homeless,
Yeah,
change policies for the better, you're not the problem. I think you are wrong on God. But
true.
again, I think everybody's wrong about everything unless they agree with me 100% of the time. I'm not going to pick every single fight because most of them don't matter in the
It's
long
true.
run. And there are plenty of atheists who are promoting just supporting or being quiet about bigotry or harm or hate or whatever because someone happens to be an atheist, as if we should be celebrating that every single time. That's short-sighted and idiotic.
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the things that I try to do is once you believe God, you got to rebuild yourself. You got to find your moral direction. Well, you
Yeah.
got to adopt different schools of thought. So you're going to rebuild yourself. But if you just leave God and you stay the person you're probably worse off, actually, I'm thinking, because there's absolutely no boundaries to what you can do.
There's no boundaries, and you didn't learn anything to begin with. So like we're not society's not winning because of you. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Agreed. Especially when it becomes a dogma, because we've seen some atheistic communities, like in well, sort of Russia and China, who ended up actually being way worse off when things are dictated. Like if atheism end up being dictated rather
Sure.
than it's a conviction, then it completely loses its power for people to stay skeptic.
Right. I mean, yeah, you're absolutely right. I'm not even arguing that because, of course, forcing people to be atheists or acting like they need to be, I'm not supporting that in any sort of way. But I'm just thinking like from a U.S. perspective where Christian nationalism is such a threat and
Yeah.
where you have one of two major political parties actively fighting to install like Christianity as the de facto religion, the idea that atheists might say, "Yeah, I'm good with that political party. We're not better off. We need to fight those people as much as we need to fight the religious extremists." And the fact that because they have some philosophical ideas in common or something, they're just on board with the bad people. I mean, it's wild.
Yeah. So what has happened? I mean, for the United States, it started as Thomas Jefferson and people like that, the
Yeah.
founding fathers, started as the most secular country you can come across in that kind of era. And it's always sort of explained itself, and God is only mentioned in the Constitution, so it may be contained. That's Christopher Hitchens saying. But then we're looking at the current affairs in the United States, and we're thinking, bloody hell! Out of all the Western countries, we think the United States is one of the one of the most religious countries in the Western world.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good question that will take many, many hours to discuss. But in general, I mean, there's a few things we could attribute it to. You have one of the two major political parties whose ideas are just harmful, and they have been for a really long time. So they're losing their share of members, and they're desperate to cling on to whatever power they have. And basically, they're not winning over voters. So if they have power, they're doing whatever extreme things they can to cling to that power. Then on the other side, you have religion. When it comes to organized religion, you have the most dominant religion in the United States, that is Christianity, that is losing its share of members as well. It's not like they have ideas anyone is attracted to either. So they're desperate to cling to their dominance as well. And all of a sudden, those two groups realize we need to link forces because we're all better off promoting each other and just making sure the people who are still in the fold remain there because they have nowhere else to turn. And again, they're willing to harm people, blow up whatever they need to blow up to maintain that power. And here's the problem, everybody else who is a much greater number than those two groups combined are not organized. This is not one other group out here. It's just a bunch of a million different factions who are not organized, trying to push back against it. And this smaller group is very organized, has a lot of money, has enough people to still be potent.
Yeah.
And So what ends up happening is you have states with Republican Christians who will do anything and everything they can to just, all right, we're losing. Time is not on our side. Demographics are not on our side. What should we do? Abortion ban, book ban, trans ban. They'll do whatever they can to push their religion because, like, they're not going to win it over with voters. They're not going to have much time left to push this stuff through. So you are seeing religious extremism win in a lot of places because those people have no other ideas. They don't want to help other people. They could. That's not a priority for them. And then you have occasionally some places where some people push back against it and maybe they gain some momentum. Not enough. I wish it was more often. But again, the existential question we are facing is, can this outside group of people who are not tied and linked to by religion and who don't love the Democratic Party necessarily, can they unite to push back against what is a harmful but small minority before these people hurt the rest of us?
I was just thinking the other day, because one of the very features of being skeptic and end up sort of leaving a religion is you're very individual. You've got a unique thinking, and we all know that trying to organize a bunch of atheists like herding cats.
Yes.
So the very positive feature that allowed somebody to leave religions in the first place is hindering them from being self-organized, while religious people using a feature of religion of having the fold, the herds, and these can be put together under one, and they can believe the same thing, and they can act as one unit, and that's their strength. They might be wrong, but
this is what's interesting. What I've seen in the past 10, 15 years, from like the new atheism time to like now, is now you have a lot of national atheist organizations that realize, you know what, we are not interested. I mean, our priority is not just making you an atheist, because like I said, just because you're an atheist, you might still be an idiot in a lot of other ways. But they realize, like, you know where we have to take our fight? To the courthouses. We have to take our fight to politicians. And we do have allies with a lot of religious groups who don't like Christian nationalism, who don't want their faith being dictated by the government, and the government should not be using their faith to decide what laws we all ought to follow. So what I've seen in the past like decade plus is that atheist groups have now been working with a lot of those progressive religious groups from all backgrounds, Jewish groups, even like Christian groups, Catholic groups that are progressive. They will work with those groups towards shared goals in a way that I did not see 10, 15 years ago, because when it comes to abortion rights, we are all on the same side of the issue. Who cares about our differences? On this, we agree. So you see a lot more working together. There is less anti-atheist discrimination overtly. I don't hear those stories very often. And the stigma is not as much of a big deal now as it used to be. And part of that is because atheists have been out and proud and not shying away from it, but also because organized religion is very clearly a problem. And it's like, oh, you're not religious? That doesn't sound so bad anymore. And even if you are religious, it's like, well, I don't care if you are religious. What kind of religious are you? If you're someone who just believes in God, whatever. I mean, you're wrong, but I don't care. But if you're someone who uses your religion to hurt other people, now we have a problem. So it's been a fascinating evolution in that sense of, in the US anyway, of how people look at religion, because it is losing. It is losing its share of the followers and supporters, but it's still powerful. Meanwhile, a lot of young people they've grown up in a country where religion has always, organized religion has always been the source of a lot of their problems and frustrations and cruelty. And it's like, well, why does anyone want to be a part of that? And they all know people who are non-religious, and they know those people are not bad people. So all the stuff their church may have taught them of what happens if you don't have faith, they know those are lies. So It's an interesting thing. We're going to only see that trend continue in the foreseeable future.
It's just very interesting from an outsider watching the American affair, and I watch a country that had the roots in its beginning as a very secular society that's going to celebrate differences, suddenly succumb to "In God We Trust" to
Ugh.
fight the Russians at the time, because these were atheists, and we have to be a little bit whatever we need to do, whatever that will actually be in contrast to them.
Yeah.
And then, do you still have the prayer in the Congress? Is there like a?
There are still prayers. There is a chaplain who leads the U.S. Congress in prayer at the beginning. Though, I will say, like, look, they shouldn't have it. There have been lawsuits over it. We have not won because the courts are not necessarily on our side on this one. But in terms of the prayer that occurs at Congress, even the chaplain who's there will use his prayer to kind of push back against religious extremism. So, look, there is some institutional religion that is still at play that, legally speaking, is really hard to stop.
Wow.
At the same time, again, I think the bigger factor here is when you look at religious politicians and what they are doing in the name of faith, the cruelty is so obvious that a lot of people, religious ones included, are like, well, I can't get behind that. And so I'm going to throw my support to the politicians. I don't care if they're religious or not. If you're against it, great. So
Yeah.
I don't know. It's working in a lot of places right now, and it's scary to live in certain states where religious conservatives have control of the government.
Yeah.
Yeah. And not just the South. I mean, there are other places, other states where that stuff has potency. But the pushback is growing. The pushback is growing in a lot of places, including those states, because it's hard to, I mean, it's one thing to say abortion is wrong, we should ban it, when it's all hypothetical. And then they actually implement those laws. And then we start hearing stories about women who are actively suffering because of it. And now it's not just a hypothetical, I'm saving a baby. Like, no, you're actually killing that woman, and her face is on the front of the newspapers. It's on the local news. And why is that cruelty happening? Oh, it's because of the Christian who voted for that. Again, if you don't pay attention, it's now much harder to miss.
We've had a law change in Australia. They got in 2019 a young girl who was drunk. And there was in Victoria, Melbourne here, we had a public drunkenness crime where the police can actually take you in and take you to jail. And that girl, they took her in, and she hit her head and she died in the cell. So they've changed the law, and they've made it now more health oriented. So somebody is, which makes sense, because if somebody is drunk, they're not hurting anyone else. All what you're trying to do is keep them in a safe environment, because they'll sober up the next day. And they probably will say, like all hangover people say always, I'll never drink again. But we always do.
I mean, the liberals in the US have been criticized for getting behind like defund the police movement.
Yeah.
And the whole thing about that is, no, how do you respond to someone who is drunk and belligerent on the road? Do you send a team of cops who have guns, or do you send a social worker or someone who can address the drunkenness? Because you're right. Like, if you take that person somewhere safe and maybe get them the help they need if they need that.
Absolutely.
That's a much better use of resources than just throwing guns and bodies at that person. And the fact that liberals have lost that argument in a lot of places because people are just saying, like, they hate cops. I mean, that's another example of right-wing propaganda just winning out over common sense.
Do you think Hemant is the weakened state of the Democrats? I mean, Biden's. I've been watching his stuff, and I think there's a huge campaign on him at the moment, trying to show him as a senile, somebody who's lost the plot.
Right.
But do you think the Democrats at the moment, the way they are sort of acting, they're not doing the system any favor because I look at it from an outsider point of view. I'm looking Trump and Biden. I was like, this is a nation of. They've done so much for the world. Is this the best they can come up with? These two?
Listen, if you're asking Democrats how much they love Biden, You're not going to get a gazillion people saying they love him. The people who voted for Biden, myself included, in the last election,
Get rid of Trump.
I don't have Biden posters on my wall. Like, I voted for him because he's the sensible alternative to chaos and lunacy. And I think that's the case for a lot of people. I think this is why all the Trump crazy people were shocked that Biden won, because they're like, but no one loves Biden. And all the rest of us are like, I don't have to love the guy. He's not a teen pop idol sort of person. I don't care. I just not you. I need to make sure you're not there. And that's the thing. Like, can you coalesce this disorganized group of people who have all these differing views? This is the problem with the Democratic Party right now, which is there is such a broad tent that there's very little that unifies all of us. But when you get to the Republican Party and Christian conservatives, they are united in causing chaos and harm to everybody. And this is the one thing that united all these people. It's not that they love Biden and every Democrat. It's that they really don't want this guy in charge. And enough of us voted against Trump in the last election. And look, they've done a lot of decent things, Biden and Democrats, in the past couple of years. It's never enough. You're not going to find any shortage of criticisms, even from prominent Democrats, about what they want Biden to be doing. As much as he can. It's never enough. But given the alternative, it is, I don't have to think about Biden every day. It's fantastic. He is not at the forefront of my mind with everything I do. Whereas when Trump was in power, it's like he injects himself into your veins every single hour of every day. And there is a part relief of knowing, okay, I can just live my life and do whatever I want to do without having to wonder what shit is Biden going to do to. I don't care. It doesn't matter. He's not my idol. He's just a dude in charge. So to your question, is this the best we can do? No. Like, listen, he's not the guy I voted for in the primary, but he's pretty bland and boring and centrist. And if that unites enough of those people, it's like, yeah, fine, I'll take it. I don't care. Give me a human body who's not crazy. And the weird thing is, for all the complaints like he's too old to be in office, he's senile, I've heard him talk. He'll do it today. He'll make some little minor gaffes here and there that every politician does. But the guy can talk. He knows what he's doing. I'm not worried about him like accidentally pushing like a nuclear button or something. He's fine. Again, there are a gazillion politicians I would love to see in charge, and not him, but he's fine.
Yeah. It's obviously the ambition is for the United States just to survive and just pass by. You want, we're heading towards a very, very important era of our life as a species on this planet. There are challenges coming at us. And, you need countries like the United States to be at its strongest.
Right.
And, in terms of pushing the science agenda, pushing how we're going to fight climate change, how we're going to fight stuff from out, do we have enough resources, fighting poverty around the world.
Right.
So you want these countries to be the pioneers, to be in a very strong state.
Right. And if they can't be the pioneers, then you need them to be stable. And just make it through until someone better can get in office. I feel like that's where we are right now. And
weather the storm.
Weather the storm as long as it doesn't get worse. And the weird thing is, here's the thing. If Republicans nominated a semi-sane person who was wrong about everything, they would probably win. But they don't want to do that because it's like this crazy cult that only loves Trump or the most extremist alternative. So the thing is, like, they're just constantly in this spiral of who can be crazier. And if that's the best they can do, then Biden's going to be fine, I think. Like, whatever people want to say about him, we can watch him give a speech. He'll be fine. He's an old dude who's like very grandfatherly and boring and bland and not exciting. But guess what? Politics should be boring. It should not be exciting. That's how you know it's working.
Yeah. I usually worry about charismatic politicians because
Right.
they could actually wrap you around their fingers and they could be doing something completely different.
Yeah.
That means they're basically bureaucrats. Somebody who's actually of the people, somebody who actually does the job. That's
Right.
what you really want.
That's what you want in government. You want people who will do the job. And like, I wish we lived in a world where I didn't know the name of like everybody in the cabinet or like all these low level bureaucrats in these
Yeah.
like high
Especially when
offices.
you watch all these prime ministers in Scandinavian countries and European countries on their bicycle, and nobody
Yeah.
cares about it. They don't even look at them twice. And it's like nothing important. It's like, God, that's brilliant. I love that.
Yeah. I don't know why I need to know who the Secretary of State is in states I don't even live in. But in the country I live in, unfortunately, those people have power and they want to make a name for themselves and they want to get on Fox News or whatever it is. And that's their only goal, to use public office, as a platform for themselves in the future. So, of course, they're going to do the most extreme stuff possible. Um, and again, it would be nice if we had really good politicians who you don't have to think about. You vote for them, and then they're out of your mind for 4 years because they're doing the work. And
Yeah.
then if they did a good job, you can vote for them again and then be done with it. That's what you want. Like,
Yeah.
there was this joke someone made on Twitter, like in 2016. Like, there was one day when like everyone was outside playing Pokemon Go on their phones because they assumed Hillary was going to win and you would never have to think about it beyond that. And then, of course, just everything is chaotic because
Yes.
you get the most narcissistic possible person
Yeah.
to win. And now you know every single person who's ever been affiliated with him because they either got convicted of a crime or they're just crazy. I mean, it's very annoying.
What is your expectations of in 2024? Because it's obviously creeping upon us. Do you
Yeah.
think Biden's going to run again? And
Yes.
do you think Trump is going to survive what's happening to him at the moment?
Yes, because he's never going to be punished for anything. So, and the Republicans aren't going to punish him for anything. So,
Right.
no, it very well will be almost certainly
The
like
two
Biden
again.
versus Trump. And Biden should, I mean, if we learn anything, it should be better for Biden this time around than before, because you have enough people who are like, I don't want to go back to Trump again. If anything, they have lost even more people. Trump's people have lost even more Americans in the years since because he's insane and they're all crazy extremists, religious
Yeah.
extremists. So, like, yeah, if it's Biden versus Trump again, yeah, part of me is like, come on, like you said, is this the best we can really do? And the answer is like, well, whatever, as long as it's not him, then fine, Biden can be president, and then hopefully at lower levels of government, you are electing more exciting, progressive politicians who can actually do better work and push Democrats in that direction, which, by the way, some people are doing. Like, a lot of the Democratic governors of several states are taking the lead on making sure their laws in their states are progressive. I'm lucky enough to live in one of those states. And you know what? If the White House has to play catch up to what the other states are doing, good. All the more reason for state level politicians and members of Congress to just keep pushing him in that direction. Because if the politics of these issues change, like abortion, if being pro-choice isn't something you have to run away from, but something you can lean into, that's good for the whole party, which means, like, I don't know how many of your viewers know this. There was just a race for like the Wisconsin Supreme Court, a court nobody should have to think about. You should not know the name of anybody on that court, even if you live in Wisconsin. But it became such a big race. And the person who was running was very clear, I support abortion rights. You would never hear a judge campaign on that saying, oh, if you put an abortion bill in front of me, I am pro-choice and I will vote in that direction. That's something you never hear from someone in that capacity, but leaned into it and won that race easily in a state where it should have been much harder. But that's the good thing about pushing one party in the good direction, where you have everyone doing the right thing. That's awesome. And the other side is just full of the craziest people imaginable.
Are there any up and coming politicians that might give them both a run for their money? As somebody who's like a dark horse.
Yes. Listen, there are a lot of really amazing politicians who are like state level representatives, mayors, governors, who are super exciting, super progressive. Chicago just elected one for mayor, who, again, no one had heard of like 2 months ago, but ran a good campaign and became mayor. Now, here's the tricky part. None of them are going to do what like Barack Obama did in 2008 and run for president seemingly out of nowhere, because if Biden runs, they're all going to be deferential to him.
Yeah.
And whatever, if he wins, I do not care. Fine. If he chooses not to run, then you are going to see these people run. But listen, at the end of the day, what all of those people have in common is they want Democrats to succeed. So if Biden is the guy at the top of the ticket, they're fine with it because he's not going to get in their way of doing what they need to do. You wait another 4 years in order for this new crop of people to bloom. But to answer your question, are there exciting people? Tons of them. They are smart, charismatic. They have learned from Democrats' failures in the past, and they grew up at a time when there are no competent Republicans. And so when they're not, Biden does this annoying thing where he's like, you know, when I was younger, these Republicans were bipartisan and sensible. And it's like, no, people under like 40 have never grown up in a country where Republicans were the party of common sense. They've always been religious crazies.
Yeah.
And so you have people not afraid to say that out loud. I wish more of those people were in power, but we are seeing that week after week where a new state representative gets in the spotlight. You have a couple of people in Nebraska right now who are holding up the entire Republican government because they have the power to say, I'm just going to stand in your way so you cannot pass an anti-trans bill. Like, we're not. You can't do anything unless you take that bill away. And the rest of the people are like, well, we have to pass a budget. Fine. Get rid of your anti-trans bill. And they won't do it. And these Democrats are holding firm. And that's amazing to see. And you saw a very racist white legislature in Tennessee kick out 2 young, charismatic black guys because they were fighting for gun safety on the floor of the House. They booted them. They did not get rid of the white woman who was with them, but they got rid of the 2 black guys. And those 2 guys are super, I've never heard of them before any of this happened, but all of a sudden everyone's paying attention, and it turns out they're like 2 brilliant young activists who are amazing. And it's like, wow, I don't know what the Republicans were thinking, but here's 2 new people who the whole nation knows now who are great. Let's elevate them, give them a platform, give them a spotlight. When there's an open race for Senate, get one of them to run. It'll be great. So there's a lot of energy and new blood coming into the system. I don't see that on the other side because the other side's full of Trump and Trump deferential people. I mean, so it's good for the future, but that doesn't mean we're out of the woods just yet.
Because to me, I'm just thinking the Democrats are waiting to see if Trump is going to run, because if he's going to run, somebody as strong and powerful must run against. Otherwise, there would be a whitewash, because Trump against a young and up and coming Democrat might not cut it.
Here's the thing. If you have a up and coming charismatic Democrat, there is who knows how that will play out if that person is up against Trump. But again, Biden, here's the one thing he has going for him. Everyone in the U.S. who cares about politics, he's been in our life forever because he's been in office for like 50 some years. There's nothing new to learn about him. He is boring and predictable. And again, that stability is useful compared to Trump and all that chaos. So like, listen, I have criticisms of Joe Biden, lots of them, but if it is Trump on the other side, the one thing you want to project is get me the most boring, non-controversial person imaginable, as opposed to the risky, maybe great, but also risky opposition. That was the concern about Barack Obama, too, in 2008, which is
Yeah.
We don't know about this guy. I mean, he seems great, but he hasn't been tested. And what if he fails at the highest level? That could be disaster.
True.
And that's not to say there are no criticisms of that guy either. There are. But again, it's a risk. And right now, if Trump is the alternative, I don't think a lot of people want to take a risk. So Biden running against Trump, not ideal, but it doesn't bother me.
Just thinking, especially about when we put in context the world's economy and what the world's going through, you probably want a routine type of person rather than a volatile, because this is not the time to take risks anyway, economically or in any other venture. You want steady, slow and steady for now.
At least at the top of the ticket, and please experiment and go radical in all the right ways, lower, and see how it works. Again, we are seeing that. You will see charismatic governors and mayors and state representatives and senators who are unabashedly progressive and left-wing and all well versed in civil rights struggles and reproductive rights and LGBTQ rights, and they're amazing. And they are winning a lot of those races. And they're winning them sometimes in very Republican states, too. So, I mean, I would rather be on my side than the other side when it comes to the future. Yeah. But there's a lot of battles we still need to fight right now.
Do you think the people still have not come over the savior complex? So they have God, they abandon God, they're looking for a charismatic leader, one person who always saves the day, rather than putting a proper system in place. And that system is strong enough to sustain whatever problem you're going through. They're always looking for that Superman.
Yeah. I mean, listen, if you want to know what has broken evangelical Christianity, they spent decades and decades saying, yes, believe in God. We have the moral high ground. These are our values. Then Trump comes along and says, I can fix everything and I can do everything. Just worship me instead. And all of a sudden, all their values get tossed out the window and they flock to Trump. I mean, there are articles that have been written where there are Christian pastors who say, I want to preach against the way the Republican Party treats immigrants and refugees. But if I do that, if I'm critical of Trump or the Republican Party, like half my church is going to leave and then I won't have a church anymore. And it's like, well, well, you're a coward, first of all. But also, like, to your point, there is such a desperation to have someone who seems to know what he's doing in the face of, like, what is life? It's a bunch of, you don't know what, no one knows what they're doing. So when you have someone who comes along who's like confident, even if it's not earned, and says, I'm the guy if you just vote for me and I will fix everything. There's a lot of people who are drawn to that. I mean, it's a stupid thing to be drawn to, but they are. I get why that's attractive to some people. And even after 4 years of not doing any of those things, they're still attracted to that vibe. But it has kind of replaced religion for a lot of those people. They'll still call themselves Christian, but they worship someone who doesn't believe any of the stuff they claim to hold true. And the cool part about that is that a lot of people, especially younger people, are watching that in real time. And it's like, oh, so all the stuff you taught us about religion and values, you lied about all of that. None of that actually matters in practice because we see what you actually support. And then they leave organized religion altogether.
This is so, I mean, this is remind me of a low budget, great movie called Napoleon Dynamite, where, you know, vote for me and I'll make your wildest dreams come true.
Right.
It's called speech. And it's in a way, that's what politicians are trying to pretty much say, you know, like, just vote for me and I'll make your life wonderful.
Yeah. And the weird thing is, what is wonderful if you're in public office? Wonderful is boring. Wonderful is you don't have to think about them because they're just doing their job. That's the job they wanted. If they do their job correctly, I don't have to think about them and I can do whatever makes me happy or whatever I want to do in my career. That would be an ideal system. Like, I would love to have a government so competent that I don't have a job anymore because there's nothing to complain about. Not going to happen.
And Hemant, the hour is upon us, but I want to finish the conversation with your take on the Dalai Lama,
Yeah.
because I'm just thinking if this was any other person,
Yeah.
caught on camera on that kind of, there will be big issues here.
Yeah, and
What's
what
your
happened? The
take?
Dalai Lama a kid said, "Can I give you a hug at
Yeah,
this meeting?" And the Dalai Lama brought him up on stage and basically at some point said, "Kiss me on the lips," and which you could argue is a cultural thing that people do. But then he's like, sticks out his tongue and's like, "Suck my tongue," and that was weird.
nice.
And here's the thing: like, you're right. If someone else in a position of authority like that did it, it would be very disturbing. And it is disturbing in this case. Listen, I don't think he was trying to be weirdly sexual. I don't think he was trying to get like aroused by it in the middle of a crowd there. What surprised me is how nobody in his orbit, and there were people on that stage when he did this, it didn't occur to him, the Dalai Lama, it didn't occur to any of them, hey, this doesn't translate. Whatever you think you are doing, this is not going to come off well. We're going to stop you right now because I don't think you realize how this looks. And sometimes when you're a religious leader or a politician or whoever, and you're so insulated in your bubble, you don't realize that some of the things you do may come off to everybody else as something completely insane. And we'll see this too. Like if you see certain Republican politicians try to answer questions with legitimate reporters who actually ask tough questions, they have no idea how to answer it because they're so used to being in a certain type of media bubble. Or you might have an atheist, like, I don't know, Richard Dawkins, who will say stupid stuff on Twitter because he's only ever been surrounded by people who treat him like he's the greatest man who ever lived. And in the Dalai Lama's case, I think it's very easy for people to say, oh, he only has the best of intentions. So of course he's not doing anything weird. And then what happens in practice, as we saw, is that when he does something weird, nobody in his circle is willing to step in and say, listen, this needs to stop because what you are doing is inappropriate. And even if you don't think it's inappropriate, it's going to come off that way to the entire world. And I'm glad to see that the world did react the way I would hope they would react. Yeah.
But we want to know what is going to actually happen because, I mean, and this is what would be the question here. Where does this come from? Because this is not a practice in Buddhism that we know of, or Tibetan, or...
I have no idea what he was going for because you're right. It's not like sucking someone's tongue is some sort of greeting in Tibet or something like that. So I don't know.
Apparently in France.
Yeah. He said it was just playful teasing and innocent. I think those were the words he used. And it's like, but that's not how you tease somebody. That's weird and very inappropriate, especially with a kid. It would not have been okay if this were like a 50-year-old woman either, but it's also not okay with like an 8-year-old boy. So I don't know what he was thinking.
Considering the pedophilia and the religious institution, I mean, they're not, they have been toying, Catholicism and other religion, pedophilia and religious institutes have been always linked together.
Yeah, I mean, again, for him to not understand the optics of this when you are someone who has been on the global stage your entire life. I mean, again, I kind of get that the Dalai Lama is in a bubble that he doesn't know how the world works necessarily because he's been famous since birth. But you're telling me nobody who works around him also knew how this would look? Nobody had the decency to stop it? Because it's not like the kid walks up and he says, here, suck my tongue. That came like a minute into their interaction, and he did like 2 or 3 other also inappropriate, but maybe less inappropriate things before that, and nobody stopped him then either. So like, that's the thing that bothered me. What is going on with the people around him? That's weird.
It's almost like I can feel they probably in a moment, when you're shocked and you're frozen.
Yeah,
probably that's the only thing I could understand.
Which is appropriate for the boy. Which is appropriate for the boy, but not the people who work for this guy. It's your job to stop your boss from doing dumb stuff.
Have you heard about any repercussions? Like actually anything is going to happen to the Dalai Lama? Can anything be? You can't. He's untouchable that way.
He didn't do anything illegal, and even though he said stuck my tongue to the boy. Nothing actually happened. The boy didn't do it,
Yeah,
thankfully. So no, I don't think there's any criminal actions that are going to take place. And so really it's only social repercussions,
which was
which I
huge.
will say those will be huge because again, if this is the thing people know you like, who's the Dalai Lama? Oh, right. He's the dude who was creepy with a little boy. Like
Yes.
that's the repercussion. And honestly, that's harmful as well in a good way. Like I'm glad that's a thing that'll be stuck on him now
Yeah, caught on
for a
camera.
while.
Yeah,
Yeah.
imagine he was doing that on like
I
with
mean,
no
there's
cameras
no
around.
Pope Francis, no obituary of Pope Francis whenever that day comes is not going to include a mention of the church's sex abuse scandals. That's
True.
important to recognize. Like, I don't care that he didn't personally do anything. He oversees the organization,
Yeah.
and he didn't do enough to put a stop to it. So, like, I don't know. Sometimes, even if there are no criminal sanctions against these people for doing these things, the social repercussions also matter.
I mean, you're about to go to Ireland now, and Ireland, some 50 or 40 years ago, used to be the Catholic capital of Europe. You know, the holy of the holies. You know,
Right.
Father Ted. You know, all these sitcoms, the Irish
Right.
sitcoms, they're all about religion. Now you go to Ireland, it's such a secular country.
Yeah.
They're pretty much
Where
abandoning religion.
abortion is legal
Yeah,
and stuff like that.
homosexual marriages, and they've actually now they're taking the Mickey, or you know, of religion these days. On there isn't an Irish joke that doesn't have the Pope or a priest in it. You know,
Right. I mean, and the question is then, is Ireland better off because it is more secular? And that's you're better equipped to answer that than I am.
I think yeah. The last couple of times I've been there around there, they're not, they don't look as repressed. They're actually expressing themselves. Some are still religious, but not in the same way.
Right.
And it's refreshing. It's refreshing to see
Yeah.
all the younger generations coming through. And Northern Ireland is slightly different because it's got it's that bubble of the you know, that is still under, you know, the British rule, and there's a bit of struggle, and you get the Protestant Catholic situation, which is very, very interesting.
This is a question I don't know the answer to, but maybe you do. Like, I think what happens when you have grown up in an Ireland where your knowledge of religion is the troubles, is the Catholic Protestant fighting that went on. Like, you did not grow up in a world where religion was a force for goodness. You know what I mean? And so it's like,
In Belfast,
right.
it's tribal. Like they actually, you're not allowed to marry from each other's, you know, and
Right.
they used to kill it. I mean, it was
And that's the thing. Like, I think we could say that about like American evangelicals too. You are not growing up in a country where American evangelicals have been a force for goodness and decency. They've always been the people with the worst ideas and the cruelest policies. And what happens when you grow up in that? You don't want to be a part of that. Maybe you believe in God, but you don't want to go to those churches. You don't want to.
Even like in Scotland, you have the two football teams there, Celtic and Rangers. One is Protestant and one is Catholic, and the derby's called the Old Firm. It's one of the strongest derbies in the world, and it's based on that sectarian religious Catholics versus Protestants, and it's infused with politics and family affairs and love stories. Those who actually love each other from within these two communities, and having to hide their relationship from their parents. It's a very strange world.
Yeah.
But obviously, religion wasn't for the best or for the good.
Right.
If you're born in those sort of areas.
Absolutely.
Hemant, I love the conversation, and I don't know, maybe we will cross paths again. I'm pretty sure I would love to have you again, and we can, especially maybe around the election, because I'd love to pick your brain and see what's going on. But I'd like to thank you so much for your time, and I wonder if you have any last thoughts you want to share with us.
No, if you're watching this, thank you so much for watching and listening. You can find me on the internet if you search for my name somewhere on Google. You'll find all my stuff. Hey, if you're on YouTube, go subscribe to my channel right now.
Yes, I've shared the channel before. In the description of the video is your Wikipedia page, your channel, and I'm pretty sure I will love to host you again if you would take me
Absolutely.
as a host at some point. But thank you very much,
Thanks, Andy.
and I wish you a great day.
Have a good one, everybody. Thank you.
See you later.